Seekers of self-realization have a seemingly profoundly difficult task ahead of them, and that is to turn the mind away from changeable objects of experience through surrender or self-inquiry at every waking moment, or as close to that as possible. And a very common issue is that one simply seems to forget to do that. You're trying and your attention just slips away. And it seems like, well, is this a problem of concentration? Is it that my attention isn't good enough? What's really going on here? The answer is always actually the same. It's nothing to do with your power of attention, generally speaking. I mean, it's very, very rarely going to be the actual issue. The actual issue in almost every case is that there is a force that resists the surrender or inquiry. And that force is the fact that there are attachments to things in the world. What does that mean? It means that there is an investment in having events turn out a certain way. Right? There are things that you like and dislike, desires and fears, connected to relationships and objects in the world, including your own feelings and thoughts, your past and your future, all connected to your identity as an individual. And the sense of being a person who makes decisions and who is in some sense in control of their life. And that is, of course, the egoic illusion that we are seeking to penetrate through the spiritual practice. So what happens is that there is an underlying, deeply rooted belief, whether it's fully conscious or it may be kind of unconscious in some sense, that for certain important things in life, you have to take action on them if you want them to turn out correctly. You're having an important conversation with a family member, or you're doing an important assignment at work, and part of you believes that that has to be done correctly, because otherwise negative consequences will follow, or you won't experience some really good thing that you've been hoping for. The underlying belief that you have to pay attention and do the thing, that is what doership is. And it's propelled by the fear or desire connected to the objects, in the world and in the mind, and the identity of who you are with relationship to those objects and to those people. The issue is that identity and its related attachments believes that surrender or inquiry, which is turning your mind away from the objects of the world, focusing instead on ignoring the changing objects or hunting, chasing the I, is going to interfere with the things that you care about, be it loved ones, responsibilities, duties, really enjoyable, beautiful things that you love, hoped for things in the future, things that you really, really want to avoid happening to yourself, maybe your health, maybe with your money, maybe with your children. So what happens is that surrender and self-inquiry are permitted to a certain extent, to the extent that one judges that they're not really going to interfere with the deeply rooted core attachments that you have. To the extent that those deeply rooted core attachments are still believed in, they come and they snatch the attention away from inquiry and surrender, because the idea is that there's an underlying belief that I am the doer, and I am the one who decides where my attention goes, and I am the one who has to concentrate on things to make sure that they go according to the way I want them to go and not some other way. And that I can't therefore focus on surrender or self-inquiry, because that's going to take away from my concentration on what really matters, which is something connected to these things. So these core attachments, or just attachments generally, we don't have to worry about whether they're core or not, but attachments generally and the fears and desires connected to them. That is to say, the things that you want or want to avoid, you know, if you want to put it down to something as simple as that. In the sense that you have to manage those affairs one way or the other for various reasons. For pleasure, to avoid pain, or for duty. You can name it what you want. You can categorize it however you like. But the point is that the attachments and the desires and fears connected to it, and the sense of being a doing entity, and the sense that surrender or self-inquiry would interfere with getting things the way you want them to with regard to those attachments. That is what arises and steals the attention away from surrender or self-inquiry. That is to say, it's not a matter of forgetfulness, it's not a matter of focus, it's not a matter of attention in some abstract sense. It is that within us, as seekers, there is a resistance to surrender or self-inquiry that is deeply rooted, and that it may not show itself up as I don't want to do surrender or inquiry. It may not be so blatant, but really what it's saying is that there's an implicit prioritization of a certain view of reality, namely that I'm an individual, I have certain things that I care about, I have to take care of them. There's a prioritization of that over this other idea, which is I'm not an individual and I'm not doing things. And to that first view, the second view is threatening, because you're not going to focus on the things you need to focus on to get the results you want. That's the belief. And so it manifests often in this forgetfulness. The attention flickers away from surrender or self-inquiry, and if you look very closely, even in retrospect, looking back, when does my attention leave? Well, it leaves because it was taken by something that you implicitly cared about to some extent. It doesn't have to be a grand thing, but something about whatever your attention flickered towards was attractive or important, even in a small way. And so, as a seeker, what has to happen is that, the attachments have to be identified. Look at what they are. Where is your attention going? And the mere fact of identifying them will already help, because then you'll be forewarned and somewhat more guarded against your attention being stolen by them. And it may also lead to thinking about and talking about what these resistances are. And the more you talk about them and the more we subject them to a spiritual view, the more they might loosen. In many ways, the story of spiritual motivation is continuously confronting the belief, the views about the futility of material endeavor. The Buddha once said to his disciples, he said, in your past lives, you have wept more tears than all the oceans of the earth combined. What is he doing with this? He's saying, look, you've already suffered so much in your previous lives. Don't keep chasing after what clearly can't be obtained, which is namely permanent happiness in contingent material things, based on an incorrect identification of who you are. And many spiritual texts have this as a kind of preamble, right? Talking about the motivation, right? Trying to persuade people that don't waste your life on chasing the temporary things of this world. I mean, they can be chased if if you're if you're in the mode of mind that recognizes they are transitory and you're grounded away from them and in the self, then one can play. But that playing happens by itself. It's not guided by quote unquote you. I mean, Jesus talks about this in the New Testament. He said, don't store your treasures here on earth where they're subject to rust and moths. Store them up in heaven where they cannot be attacked. Meaning, put your treasure in the self. That's where the actual treasure is, right? I mean, all these different texts say it. Shankara's Bhajagovindam, talks about this as well, right? Saying, look, are you going to take your relatives with you after you die, or your wealth? None of these things are going to last. So focus while you are still able on the eternal. So I mean, confronting these texts, talking about these, thinking about these, speaking with spiritual people and being in their company, all of these things help loosen the attachments. And of course, surrender and self-inquiry themselves, even if you cannot do them perfectly, because no one can do them perfectly, to whatever extent they are done, to whatever extent prayer is done, to whatever extent any spiritual practice is done, it will help chip away at the attachments. Some further degree of detachment and peace will happen, and that will slowly chip away at the roots of the attachments. But the main point I wanted to make here is this idea of attention and forgetfulness is not exactly what it seems to be. Forgetfulness happens not just because one is forgetful, not just because it's hard to maintain attention, generally speaking. It's because there are specific attachments and identities that generate resistances to turning your attention away from the changing things of the world. There are parts of yourself that feel like, no, you have to pay attention. If you don't pay attention to this, if you don't focus on this, if you don't do this with your focus and sort of deliberate desire to accomplish it, right? Identification with it. If you turn instead to surrender or self-inquiry, something really bad is going to happen. You're going to lose out on something important, or basically. That's what prompts the forgetfulness. It's sort of couched in this innocent idea of forgetfulness, but actually it's just a disguise for attachments, desires, fears, and identifications.